Welcome everybody. I'm Sharon Constanson. I'm Chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce, and I welcome you here with us this morning. We have people from more than one country joining us, which is lovely. We have people from both South Africa, the UK, and I do see we have got some others from a little bit further afield. So wonderful to have such a good audience. Today's modern slavery, which is a slightly different conversation to many of the conversations we've had recently. So our speakers today are from a number of different backgrounds and different strengths and capabilities. We have Carolyn Tom, who is the founder of a charity called Their Voice. Reason for the title is it's the voice and the support to people who have been involved in modern slavery and helping them reconstitute their lives and re-enter into communities. We also have Tertia with us. Tertia is from South Africa, whereas Carolyn is from the UK. Tertia is part of the National Freedom Network in South Africa and a founder of the Joseph Movement. So again, looking at the modern slavery circumstances as they play out in the South African environment. To complete our lens on the way we are looking at these things, I'll also be speaking to Colin Macon, who is Senior Employment Counsel for appallingly, which is both a UK and South African company. Colin is South African, but he's coming to us from the UK environment and talking about how a large corporate handles the degree of complexities that organizations are trying to face. One of the biggest things is recognizing, is it occurring? What is it? What is modern slavery? And Carolyn will start by telling us how that fits in to the different activities that are classified in the modern slavery environment. So while you introduce yourself, Carolyn, and get started, I will get your slide up.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Sharon, for the introduction and inviting me to speak on the webinar today. Allow me to share a little bit about the work we do with survivors of human trafficking and modern slavery in the UK. The agenda for this morning is what is modern slavery and human trafficking. I want to show a short film about a true story of a girl that was trafficked into the UK and her experiences. Then I want to tell you a little bit about who is Their Voice and how we support survivors. So what is modern slavery? In a nutshell, it's a selling of women, men and children for financial or personal gain. The United Nations recent study published this week states 50 million people are in modern slavery worldwide. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is a process of trapping people through the use of violence, deception or coercion and exploiting them for financial or personal gain. Allow me to break this down a little more. So human trafficking, it can affect anyone regardless of social and economic standing. The United Nations say to have been human trafficked, the following 5 components have to be experienced. 1, the recruiting by deception or against will. 2, the transporting across international borders or taken to a new location in the same country. Monies are then transferred and people are brought and sold. Victims may be locked away or controlled by using physical violence, verbal threats, intimidation, starvation, drugs, whilst their freedom and dignity is being stripped away. And then finally, they're forced to live a life of exploitation. That's for little or no money, passports taken away, and victims are charged with unpayable debts. So what types of modern slavery are there? Well, for starters, modern slavery generates $150 billion of illegal profits each year. Slavery is found in many forms, and here are some examples. I'll start with forced crime. I won't go through all of them, Forced crime is like drug trafficking, cannabis farms, shoplifting, and begging. Children are used as they are not at the criminal age of responsibility. And over here in the UK, we have something that's called county lines. And this is where criminals will groom and manipulate children into drug dealing and sexual exploitation. Another real biggie is forced marriages. This is when a child or an adult has not consented to be in a marriage, they're unable to leave, and have to perform domestic chores or sexual acts. At the end of last year, some 22 million were living in forced marriages. Every year, 12 million girls marry or enter a union before the age of 18. The younger the child gets married, the more likely they are to experience exploitation. Another one is the illegal organ harvesting. That's the removal of someone's organs or eggs to sell on the black market. Kidneys are the most common organ taken and can be sold for £190,000. The donor often receives no money, or when they are offered money, they'll say, we'll give you £1,000, but they often just receive £100 or £200. What I want to do now is show you a short film, which is a true story of a girl who was trafficked to the UK and what her experiences were. There are two narratives to this story. There is Ida, who is sending a message home, telling her parents she is okay, she is studying, and no, she doesn't have any boyfriends. The other narrative is the reality of Ida's real situation, a glimpse into the living nightmare of modern slavery.
All young girls have dreams, don't they? I worked hard at school so that when I grew up, I could get a good job and help my parents. Buy them all the things they never had, the things they needed. And I could have a different life, a better life. Yes, everything is fine. Yes, a job. I'll send you some money soon. Tell Papa not to worry. Where do I live? Oh, it's a nice flat. I share with some other girls. Things were hard at home, but we had neighbors whose children were sending money back from England. So when someone my uncle knew said he could help get me in an office or a restaurant, my parents said yes. Of course, there was a price. They had to borrow the money. Yes, I'm getting help with my English. Yes, everyone is very friendly. There were 12 of us in a van. For 2 or maybe 3 days. We ran out of water long before we stopped. There was a baby crying. And they said to the mother, "We throw you both in the sea." I just prayed for it to be over. No boyfriends, no time for that. They said, "Your parents owe us a lot of money, and you work hard to pay it back. If you don't, we will kill them." They take my passport. And then it started. 12, 15 men every day. Yes, I'm kept very busy. I got ill, but still, always the men, they come. Then one day they are moving, 3 of us in a van, and it broke down. They are walking us along the street, and I just ran. They caught me, but I fell to the ground and I started screaming. and people came to help. And then someone called the police. They arranged for me to go to a refuge that helps trafficked women. I'm beginning to get better. My English is getting better. And I'm helping some of the other girls. Most of all, we are safe. But I know that there are others still trapped, like I was. And other girls in the same situation can be helped too, given hope that things can change. Will you give them that hope?
Quite a powerful film. So Ida asked the question, will you give them that hope? And it's with a resounding yes, that we, their voice, are more than willing to give them that hope and help that is needed. So who is Their Voice and how did it start? Their Voice is a registered charity in England, founded in 2015 by myself. I come from a social work background and I worked in the local authority for 12 years, and I always felt very strongly against injustices. During this time, I earned the Diploma of Therapeutic Counselling, which stood me in good stead for insight into trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder and loss. Combining these two elements, I offered my time to work at a safe house for families who'd escaped from modern slavery. It was here I was asked to put some toiletries together, to put in the bedrooms for two newly rescued victims arriving at the safe house that day. I went into the stock cupboard and came across a big plastic box of toiletries. As I went through them, I found that a lot of the toiletries were very old. The bottles of body lotions, for example, had congealed. Toothbrushes had no packages in, and there were like grit and dirt in the bristles. Perfumes that were so old that they had lost their scent, and half-used bottles of shampoo and conditioner. There were some new items, and it was with those new items I put them in a shoebox with some tissue and placed them in the women's bedrooms. I wasn't happy with this shoebox of mixed toiletries. I couldn't help but think, these women have been through enough. Surely they deserve better. What I wanted to give them was a radical welcome. And this is here where I got the idea of getting a wicker basket full of colour-coordinated toiletries, cellophane wrap them with a ribbon and a welcome note written in 8 different languages. This idea evolved. So in 2015, we supplied 5 welcome baskets to the safe house per month. In 2021, we have supplied 170 welcome baskets. Each basket is tailor-made to meet the individual ethnicity. For example, hair and skin products needed for the Afro-Caribbean clients. Whilst working at the safe house, I could see there were gaps in the service provision. And that's when I started to think, I want to form a charity and plug these gaps. I wanted to build a charity that would support survivors of modern slavery to help them rebuild their lives. So therefore, their voice evolved with a clear goal to empower, enable, and give hope for the future to men, women, and children who had been victims of modern slavery. So how do we support our victims? Our charity is a service provider that's divided into 3 divisions of support. The practical support, as you can see, there's a list here of some of the items that we provide, but we specialise in the assessment of the practical needs of survivors, This need could be from a washing machine to a bicycle to a detailed care package for a newborn baby, or a bespoke clothes package for adults. When a need is identified, we network resources in the local community and the corporate world to provide quality items for the beneficiaries. The charity's ethos is to make survivors feel valued. In 2021, we supported 1,884 survivors and aspire to grow our numbers. The increase in requests for adult clothing increased by 400% last year, and we're now supplying sports clothing to help promote physical activity and give the survivors a boost in health and well-being. Another side of thing is we offer emotional support. Perhaps here I can give a little story. On the 2 photos at the bottom, you can see a little outfit for a baby and a cot and a hospital bag and a newborn baby pack. But just to put context behind this, I was working in the safe house and I was walking down the corridor and I heard somebody crying in one of the bedrooms. So I knocked on the door and asked, could I come in? And the girl inside beckoned me in. She was a young girl, about 20, and she was about 30 weeks pregnant. She showed me the picture of her scan of her baby daughter. All she kept saying to me is, I don't want my baby to have the life that I've had. I've been abused since the age of 4 and nobody has ever wanted me. As we sat and talked, I sensed her world of helplessness and hopelessness. She said she had nothing for her baby and didn't know what things she would need, and she would not be a good mother. We talked more, and together we started to plan her room as to where she could put her cot. She'd clear some space for her baby equipment. I said we would supply the cot, the hospital bag, the baby basket of clothes, and all items needed for her newborn, plus a pram. We discussed names for her daughter, and I felt her mood shift as she began to investigate the future and prepare for the arrival of her baby. The following week, I returned with the items we had discussed. We busily prepared setting up the cot, and she wanted to choose the outfit to bring her baby home, hence the little picture. This is what she chose. As I left that room that day, I turned to say goodbye, and she looked at me and said, "Where were you when I was 4 years old?" Another thing that we do is restoring confidence. We host workshops in the Safe House. We use creative arts to help the girls focus on the present and not live in the past. We play interactive games using ESOL skills to help them learn the English language, with the aim to build confidence and equip the women with knowledge and skills to support them with life beyond the Safe House. And finally, the last division is raising awareness. By speaking at events, we're able to raise awareness of modern slavery. We can do this by means of community talks, Zoom calls, radios, radio interviews. We want to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. We want to tell people about slavery in their community. So do get in touch with us if you would like us to speak at one of your events. And finally, I'd like to draw this presentation to a close and thank you for listening. And yes, thank you.
Carolyn, I think I feel as emotional as I can sense you are feeling. You are involved in this every day. And usually when in that circumstance, one gets used to it. Your sensitivity and your emotion is very, very, very touching. And I thank you for taking us on that journey with you. It is about people's lives, and it is really, really quite tragic that this happens in modern day. Just one question, we're going to keep most questions to the end, but we often make the assumption that those in modern slavery within the United Kingdom are foreigners, people from Africa, from Asia, from other parts of the world. Is that the case, or are there actually Caucasian, European, white Britons that fall into this category outside of your ethnic ones, which is the ones we hear about more often?
Yeah, I think under the National Referral Mechanism, which is a scheme that the government put in place to monitor how many people are coming into the UK, into modern slavery, the highest number of nationals that come in are from Albania, but the second highest is UK English nationals that are being trafficked in the UK, and the third is Eritrean. So it's a wide range, but it's mainly with the English, it's children. They're being groomed onto these county lines and they're just being trafficked in the UK for drug trafficking and sexual exploitation.
People are horrible, aren't they? It's quite something. Tertia, as I end this slideshow, would you like to put your slides up? And I welcome Tertia to the platform.
As already said, my name is Tertia de Klerk, and I'm a member in my personal capacity of the National Freedom Network. And I'm also a spokesperson for the National Freedom Network here in South Africa. And I'm also the founder and the managing director of the Joseph Movement, which helps to either reduce, expose, as well as prevent human trafficking. So the reality of human trafficking, what we've been seeing is that it's the second largest organized crime in the world. However, it is the fastest growing illegal crime, or organized crime rather, in the world. Now, in South Africa, we're very proud to say that we have legislation by the name of the Pakotip Act, and it's the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act. Now, this piece of legislation is actually considered one of the best pieces of legislation globally when it comes to combating human trafficking. But we have found in working on the ground that it is not actually implemented yet that effectively. The tip, or this Pakotip Act, also indicates, and this is a very important factor that we should always be aware of, that when it comes to human trafficking, transportation is not always necessary. For instance, there are families that prostitute out their own children out of their own homes. So that's just an example. So remember that when it comes to human trafficking, transportation is not always necessary. From what we know in South Africa, approximately 155,000 people are trapped in human trafficking at any given time. And unfortunately, when it comes to South Africa, we are considered as one of the countries which is a source, a transit, and a destination country. Now, the factors within our country that helps fuel human trafficking is, of course, the first one, which I think a lot of people are quite tired of hearing, but it is the high unemployment rates. And unfortunately, after the pandemic, that has increased, and it has increased people's vulnerabilities. Then also we've got weak and corrupt border control, muti, which is very big in South Africa, and also other cultural practices such as ukutwala, which used to be a beautiful Xhosa practice that has been distorted throughout the years. And then, of course, technology and pornography, especially online pornography, and yes, as well as prostitution. So pornography and prostitution, we must remember fuels human trafficking. Now, Caroline has also kindly mentioned to us the different kinds of human trafficking. So I just want to add to her list. So the various phases of human trafficking, besides the most well-known ones, which is sex trafficking and labor trafficking, also include domestic servitude, forced marriage, forced begging, forced illegal activities. Then there's the zama-zamas, which is the illegal minors, child soldiers. There's also snuff movies and what's called bacha-baza or bacha-bazi. My apologies, and that's basically boy play. And then, of course, baby harvesting and organ harvesting. So besides the first two, sex trafficking and labor trafficking, what is most prevalent within our country, being South Africa? So the most prevalent form of human trafficking is domestic servitude. Then there's also the forced marriage, which is also known as ukutwala. As I mentioned earlier, it's been distorted throughout the years. It used to be a beautiful practice, but now it's actually true abduction, where very young little girls are taken by force from their homes and handed over to much older men for sexual exploitation and for domestic servitude. We also see a lot of begging on our streets. Unfortunately, after the pandemic, it has added other cultures as well. But forced begging has become extremely prevalent within our country. The next one is baby harvesting and organ harvesting. And we are very grateful because we've seen a couple of months ago that there are actually, I want to emphasize, trustworthy officials who are willing to stand up, even put their lives on the line, to speak up and to expose even medical professionals who are involved in baby harvesting now specifically, and they are and have been exposing some of them. So just quickly, just to elaborate a little bit more, we find from what we know, because unfortunately human trafficking is a hidden crime, a lot of it is overshadowed by other crimes, so the statistics are very difficult. But from what we know and from what has been exposed is that what's happening in South Africa a lot is that African women who are expecting multiple children, they are normally the main targets when it comes to baby trafficking. They give birth and then they are told that, you know, maybe 1 out of the 2 or 2 out of the 3 babies did not survive, but they actually became victims of baby harvesting. Then another big problem that we find in South Africa, and it's actually been on the news quite often, is zama-zamas. So zama-zamas are actually illegal minors, and we do sympathize sometimes because we realize because of economical crises and so forth, many do go into that field to try and take care of themselves or loved ones. However, there is a very big percentage of exploitation where even children are being forced to be zama-zamas, and they are forced into very dangerous, unstable mines. Another very prevalent face of human trafficking in South Africa is various kinds of forced illegal activity. Carolyn also touched on it. For instance, some trafficked victims are forced to be transporters or carriers of drugs. So just to touch on quickly on who is the National Freedom Network. So the National Freedom Network is a very strong support base within our country. And the role of the National Freedom Network is that it connects role players, both from civil society as well as governments. What makes the National Freedom Network amazing is that they are completely independent and neutral, but they are a link between civil society as well as government to ensure that the interaction between all of them allows for a proper flow of communication. It allows for all of us to always be on the same page. We share information with one another. We are linked with one another. We share resources as well as best practices, which is very vital when you want to be effective in combating human trafficking, understanding legislation. And also what's extremely important is the National Freedom Network, as well as those that are part of the network, believe very strongly in collaboration. Collaboration is key, otherwise our reach is very poor. There's also government structures that have been put in place or have been established over the past decade at provincial as well as at national level. And the National Freedom Network works very closely with them. So quickly to touch on the Joseph movement, of which I'm the founder. From what we know, only up to 2% of victims ever get saved or manage to escape. And so the Joseph movement has been established to focus on prevention. We believe that prevention is key, looking at the stats. And how do we do that? We do that through preventative awareness and education. We love building relationships with mainstream media, and we love talking on TV, television, radio, and YouTube. And we have various programs as well that are tailor-made for adults, such as for teachers and for parents. And then we also have children's programs. We had one in English, and it has recently been translated into Afrikaans, because we go into various communities. And we find that in South Africa specifically, a lot of the exploitation happens from rural to urban areas, or rather victims are moved from rural into urban areas to be exploited. Another way that we help in combating human trafficking is we believe in helping to reduce people's vulnerabilities. In South Africa, as you might know, we have many, many rural areas, and that is where most of the vulnerabilities lie. So we actually enjoy going into the communities, and we do events, we do street outreaches. Currently, we're only focusing on nighttime street outreaches. And then we also believe in building relationships within the communities. When we go into the little educare schools within these communities, we also believe that we're not going to just do a little talk with the kiddies, but we believe that they need to know that there's a safe person that they can go to if there's abuse at home, or maybe any abuse happening at the school. We believe in connecting the children with the closest NGO within their area. And then we also educate and equip that NGO, and we keep them accountable. And then, of course, as mentioned earlier, I think this is one thing that I've learned through the National Freedom Network, that collaboration is absolutely vital, and that helps us extend our reach. So where the Joseph movement focuses mainly on preventative education and helping to reduce vulnerability, we partner with organizations that have training and experience on extraction, on counseling, and also on equipping. And most probably one of the most important numbers that we believe adults should memorize and that we normally teach the children is South Africa does have a national human trafficking hotline number. It's an easy number to remember, so 0800 222 777. And this is a toll-free number. This is also an NGO, which is dependent on financial support, but they continue nevertheless to do amazing work. They have people on the ground who do further research if any information comes in, and it then escalates to investigations. And then they would work closely then with the Hawks, which does amazing work in South Africa. We have also tried to make it easy for people to make contacts if they need help or information. So we do have a WhatsApp line. Not everyone is always able to make a phone call. So we have a WhatsApp line that can be used, and then we are also very, very active on social media. So thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Tertia. Very interesting, and interesting the different perspectives that you and Carolyn brought of the South African and UK situations. They're not identical, but the degree of overlap and commonality is very distinct. I'd like to move now on to Colin. If you could join us on screen, that would be fantastic, Colin. And I think one of the things that you're going to share with us is how does a large multinational corporate protect itself in every way that it needs to against these human challenges that we seem to create as communities for ourselves. Over to you, Colin. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sharon. Yes, as Sharon said, I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle. So I'm going to discuss how a large commercial business seeks to deal with modern slavery risks in its business and in its supply chain. So Sharon mentioned I work for a company called Servitude, and we are a leading facilities management provider. We're part of a global group, Italian group, and that group has around 130,000 employees in the world. Here in the UK, we have 28,000 employees, and we have about 2,200 vendors in our supply chain. So clearly, modern slavery is a live issue for our business. So being a large business, the first thing we're required to do, and this is a legal requirement, we have to each financial year put together something called a modern slavery statement. And we've got to set out the steps we take as a business to deal with modern slavery. And those things will include steps like due diligence, risk assessments, training, and what policies we have in place. So in terms of policies, the obvious policy is our anti-slavery and human trafficking policy. That makes clear our zero tolerance approach to modern slavery and human trafficking. It includes mandatory training requirements for our employees, prevention, detection, and reporting of modern slavery or any issues or any concerns is the responsibility of all of our employees. It is very important to create that culture and also to have employees feel that they are protected and they can be comfortable to speak out if they have any concerns or if they suspect anything, and very, very important to make it clear who they can speak to. So that's training, and managers need to be identified as being the people employees can speak to. Things like corporate social responsibility policies, that makes it clear that we won't deal with any suppliers unless they treat their employees fairly and have respect for their human rights. So those are just a few policies that we have and we apply. What I'd like to move on to is perhaps some more practical things we tend to do in the business to try and identify, spot, and deal with modern slavery. So having a large workforce, we carry out lots of checks. So example, we will on a monthly basis carry out residential checks. So for example, if we have if those checks pick up, we have a number of employees living at the same address, that might be a red flag. We might need to look at that. We're also very, very clear that we will only pay wages into a bank account for a named individual. So employees all have to have their own bank account with their name on it. We won't pay into third parties, and we won't employ people who do not have a legitimate bank account. And we also carry out checks in relation to bank accounts. So, for example, those checks might pick up that two individuals have the same account, or money is being paid into the same account. That might be a red flag, might be something we need to look at. The other thing is, because we're a facilities management business, we often are taking on contracts or picking up new contracts from clients, and this often involves large number of employees coming into the business or transferring into the business when we pick up that contract. So one of the things we do in that respect is we look out if there are any large groups of individuals, employees coming to us who are from the same nationality. So it's not a specific nationality, but if they are, that might be a red flag. So that's something we look at. The other thing, for example, we may look at if a particular colleague of ours is being paid a large amount of money for excessive hours. Now that can flag up two things. Firstly, it could show that they're being forced to do excessive hours, and secondly, it might indicate that a number of people are actually working those hours that we are then paying out, and those could be signs of modern slavery. We encourage these things to be investigated very quickly, because you'd often have a situation where an issue is raised and then people will resign immediately and you never hear from them again and you cannot contact them. So important to investigate these things quickly. And part and parcel of this is developing a curious mind amongst our managers. Are they trained to spot the signs? So we do that. So for example, are they seeing is it the same people coming to the shift every time? Are people being dropped off, groups of people being dropped off on site by the same person every day? Even spotting things like an employee's demeanor. Are they wearing the same clothes every day? What is anything that in their appearance that might indicate that something is not quite right? And of course, those managers have an open communication with HR who will help them if they're concerned about any issues. And want to raise any particular point. So, and this also leads into if we are, for example, working on a client site. So we provide a service to a client. We don't own the site. It's important to have a good relationship with that client, who may also be on site more than our managers, and they can often pick up issues. So it's important for them to be able to communicate with us to spot any issues. We also, as part of our supply chain, require our suppliers to have safe contractor accreditation. Now, that accreditation will check and vet those suppliers and make sure that they have modern slavery policies and practices in place, and if required, they will each year provide a modern slavery statement. One area in the UK that is identified as quite vulnerable to modern slavery is the agricultural sector, and so we provide catering services, and part of that, of course, we will have catering supplies delivered to us as part of this so-called field to fork supply chain. So as part of that, we are a licensed gang master, which gives us access to something called the Gang Masters and Labour Abuse Authority. And that allows us to work closely with them. They will help with identification. They will help with protecting vulnerable individuals, spotting possible slavery. So we have a good channel of communication with them. And I think that just will lead me to leave on this note. I think the final thing is it's important to engage with the appropriate authorities if needed. So know who you need to speak to, have a relationship, know what your reporting lines are, and how authorities can help. So that's all I had to say on that, but I hope that gives a nice overview of some of the ways in which a large modern business is looking to deal with and spot modern slavery. So thank you.
It's such a difficult one as to actually identify, because quite often people are embarrassed about the circumstance and will tend to hide it, particularly if it's not a full-on, for want of a better word. So people are being abused within the home environment that Tertia was referring to. The statistics that I've got here, it says it's estimated 45.8 million people are in slavery across the globe. And this is in times where this is banned, and we still have 48 million people. It states here that every 30 seconds, somebody becomes a victim of modern slavery. Those statistics are absolutely horrendous when you read something like that. Yes, the globe's a big place. It might not be happening in your village or in your doorstep, but it is happening in every country from what we are understanding. So if I could ask the team, panel, Colin, Tertia, Carolyn, if you could please come on camera. What I'd like to do is maybe just pose one or two questions. We've got a few minutes left. And just see if there is some added content that we can bring to what we have been talking about. We've talked about how big the industry is, and we've also talked quite between Tertia and Carolyn how broad this market is and how many areas in which it might be happening. But if you take it down to our day lives, we're living in our village, we're living in our company, we're living in our business, we're living in the restaurants that we are getting served in. And one of the things, Tertia, you made very clear as well was speak up. If we do suspect something, there are mechanisms in which we can do something. What could we do if we came across it in a service environment like Serviced is? Colin, you said something about people suddenly disappear if you start to suspect it. Maybe, Colin, start with yourself, then maybe Tertia, then Carolyn. What would be your advice to Joe Public, people that are on this call today, for them to do something that would make a difference? How are they going to see it? And what would you advise them to specifically do? We'll go around the three of you. Thanks, Colin.
Sure. I think I'd start by saying it's one of those things where you may see something and you start to doubt, well, is it this or is it that? I think if there's any signs, then rather report it than don't, I think is the first point. And I think there is a national modern slavery helpline in the UK, like Tertia mentioned in South Africa. There's one in the UK, and of course the police. I mean, the police will always want to know about this. So it could be in a store you see something. It could be it could be at the car wash. If something is not quite right, then do go and raise the point. And I think rather do that than not. I think that would be my point. Because you could be
saying something.
Yeah.
Tertia, your feedback?
Sorry, my apologies. Yes, I think it's I agree completely with Colin. It is very important for us to know. For instance, we normally would be so aware of the emergency numbers. In South Africa, it's 10111, and we normally teach our children that number. But I strongly believe that your national human trafficking number is one of the most important numbers that we need to use and memorize. And funny enough, Colin, I also always say to people, even if you're not sure, phone that number, give them all the details, report it, because rather be wrong and report it than be right and not report it. So that is very important. And unfortunately, the problem with human trafficking is it is a hidden crime. We're talking about statistics and so on, and we know for a fact that stats cannot possibly be 100% correct, especially when it comes to crime. So unfortunately, it is a hidden crime and it's often overshadowed by other crimes. But if you are suspicious, please help us in combating this extreme evil, because the problem with human trafficking or modern day slavery is it infiltrates so many areas. And I mentioned earlier that one form of human trafficking is forced illegal activity. So there are so-called criminals out there that are actually victims of human trafficking. And what they are committing, they are doing because they are being forced, their lives are being threatened, or the lives of their families. So don't be scared to report it. If you're wrong, doesn't matter. If you're right, you can possibly save a life.
One of the things that does cross my mind is, and there must be a crossover here between domestic violence and modern day slavery. And I would rather, as you're saying, report, and it turns out to be domestic violence, you're still helping somebody, even if you haven't got to modern slavery. Carolyn, final words from you.
Well, I just totally endorse what Colin and Tertia have said. You know, if you have that gut feeling something is not right, report it. We had an elderly lady who was just noticed across the road. Her property, there was property rented, and there was a van arriving early in the morning, picking up about 5-6 people, driving off. House was quiet all day, and then they would return late at night. Big stacks of pizza boxes by the dustbin. And she just had that gut feeling. She contacted the National Modern Slavery Helpline, said what she had seen, and they actually put the house under surveillance, and the net result was 71 slaves were rescued. So if you get that gut feeling, report it, please.
Thank you, Colin. That was a very heartfelt plea at the end on behalf of all of you and all of us. Some comments in the chat box thanking people for the, not so much in the chat, in the Q&A actually, thanking you all for your presentations and the impact that we can make as individuals, making our voices heard. As with everything, whether we're in the board of a company or in a family, in an environment that's not right, it is our responsibility to look after those around us. And this is one of the many, many areas where that does exist. And lovely to see some of the big corporates are trying to deal with that. I know a number of corporates 10 years ago weren't doing this. So I sincerely hope the one I have in mind is doing something about it now. So thank you so much, all three of you. It's been really enlightening. I have learned a huge amount. And to those who did join us, thank you very much for being here. I hope you learned as much as I did and being inspired by those that are making a difference in 3 completely different ways. So thank you all, really appreciate it. And in our customary manner, thank you very much. Thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. Thanks Colin, thanks Carolyn, thanks Tertia. Thanks, bye.